Alright, in this video we are going to make the reflection for the buildings, and then there'll be one more little step that we need to do to kind of straighten these things out and kind of finish them off. First thing, if you notice, my buildings now are kind of like straight across along the bottom, and in the last video they weren't lined up. I'm going to show you real quickly how I did that. So what I did is I did View, Perspective Grid, and I showed the grid. Then what I did is I made two rectangles that I knew I was going to delete later. One for the left, one for the right. So my widget happens to be on the left-hand side here, so I'm going to go ahead and create that rectangle. And that rectangle just needs to be long enough that it goes past my buildings. Doesn't matter how tall it is or what color. I'm going to delete this later. I'm going to go ahead and do the right-hand widget. Now, most of you probably caught that mistake and had your things lined up as you were going. You may not even need to do this step, but mine weren't lined up, so here's how I fixed it. I drew these two rectangles, then I turned off the perspective grid because all those green lines were in my way. To get these to line up, now you can start by trying your perspective selection tool, but I can't get this thing to move because it has this symbol on here, and it kind of like when I took the symbol off and made it so I could put the gradient on there, it's no longer thinking it's in perspective, so I can't kind of adjust it anymore. So instead what I need to do is I'm going to have to kind of cheat and use my regular selection tool, which I've been telling you not to use. And what I did is I was close before with these, so when I nudge them just a little bit with that tool to get them to kind of line up with these boxes, now everything matches up, and because I just barely moved it at all, it's not noticeable that I kind of used my regular selection tool. The horizontal lines still look like they're pointing to the same dots on the outside, to the same vanishing points. Once you have those lined up, you can go ahead and get rid of these two boxes. So again, I just used my regular selection tool. I just kind of stretched the buildings out however I needed to. Now obviously I would need to go back and like this side should match up with the other one. And again, I didn't do that. So I'm getting this message because I didn't put a gradient on here. Most likely if you guys make any of these adjustments, you're not going to see this message because you've already seen it when you were kind of initially putting the gradients on your buildings. So anyway, let's pretend everything's lined up, and I'm ready now to go ahead and start making my reflection. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in my layers window and I'm going to create a new layer. So we have this new empty layer. Next thing I'm going to do, I closed the layer one just so it's easier to look at. I clicked here. That little blue box selected everything in this layer. So I already created a new layer, and to do that I hit this new layer button. I clicked here so that everything is selected, and now I'm going to hold Option and just drag this into layer 2. So what I effectively just did was I copied everything from layer 1 and I put it in this blank layer 2 over here. Well, one of these is going to be my reflection, one of these are going to be the original. So I'm going to just call this top one buildings, and I'm going to call this bottom one reflection, just so I don't get confused. It's important that the bottom one is reflection because we might kind of have these overlap slightly, and if we do, I want to make sure that the reflection is kind of hidden behind my buildings. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take this reflection one. I'm going to move all of this stuff. So again, I selected it all by clicking right here in this little box. And I'm just going to move that down a little bit to start. And again, I'm getting this message because some of my things were still symbols and all, so you may not see that. And what I want to do now is flip this upside down. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click, transform, and I want to reflect that thing. And I want to do it horizontally. So I hit OK, and now I can move this thing, and it is starting to look like a reflection a little bit. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to use my arrow keys and just kind of nudge that to the right spot. Now, my reflection isn't going to be as tall as my original building, so I'm going to shrink this down. Obviously, these don't line up yet. We'll take care of that in a moment. But first thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of the windows and doors on these. Now, for the sample one, just for the sake of the video, I probably won't do all of them, but I'll just show you this process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on here. Now, if I delete this, I lose everything, so that's no good. If I double click on it, still lose everything. However, if I keep doing that, eventually I'm going to get to the point where I can just pick these individual chunks of windows or individual windows at a time, and I can just kind of clean this up. And what we want for our coloring is just going to be the building itself. So I'm going to get out of this now by double clicking somewhere else, and I'm going to do this one. And again, I'm looking to keep double clicking until I can get the individual pieces to delete all the details but leave the buildings. And you would continue this process on all of your buildings. I'm going to stop here just for the sake of kind of keeping the video short. If you need to, now you can pause the video and go ahead and delete all the windows and doors and anything else you might have made on your buildings. Just leave the buildings themselves. Alright, now what I want to do, I want to go ahead and try to get these to line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my selection tool, I'm going to draw a box, careful to touch everything on this left-hand side here, but making sure I don't touch the right and making sure I didn't kind of contact anything at the top. So there we go. So there's all of that stuff on the left. And what I need to do is I need to kind of twist this thing so that it fits better. So I'm going to do a side at a time. I'm going to right-click, transform, and shear is going to be the one that I end up needing. I'm going to have preview on, that's big. I got to make sure I'm doing a vertical one, and I'm just going to try typing numbers. And I know from doing this before, 6 degrees for me is about what's right. Once you have that where it looks like it's right to you, I could always come in and shear it again, but I think that's going to be right. I'm going to move this up, and I'm going to nudge it with my arrows to get it just kind of where I think I need it. I'm going to do the same thing now to this right-hand side. So I'm going to select these buildings, again, careful not to touch anything I don't want. And I'm going to right-click and transform, shear that thing. And I know in this case, it's got to be -6 for me. And again, I'm going to line that up. And I noticed on mine I had a little gap, so what I'm doing is I'm just going to kind of nudge this up and then 1 pixel to the left. And there we go. So now my reflection should hopefully kind of line up. And there we go. So now I have my reflection kind of started. In the last video, we will look at kind of finishing this off so it really looks like a reflection.